Hello, you are watching the Daily Roundup by People's Dispatch, where we bring you some of the top stories from around the world. Let's take a look at the headlines. UK Home Secretary approves extradition of Julian Assange. US sanctions 9 companies for dealing in Iranian oil. Israeli forces kill 3 Palestinian youth in a raid in Jenin. Italian migrant rights groups organize mobilizations demanding rights. In a disastrous move for press freedom, UK Home Secretary Priti Patel sanctioned the extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the US. The decision was confirmed by the Home Office on June 17. A statement posted on the WikiLeaks Twitter account condemned the outcome as a dark day for press freedom and for British democracy. It added that it was in Priti Patel's power to do the right thing. Instead, she will forever be remembered as an accomplice of the United States in its agenda to turn investigative journalism into a criminal enterprise. Assange's legal team will have 14 days to appeal the decision, an action they have confirmed that they will pursue. Today is not the end of the fight, it is only the beginning of a new legal battle. We will appeal through the legal system. The next appeal will be before the High Court. Assange is being held at the high security prison in Belmarsh after being forcibly removed from the Ecuadorian embassy in London in 2019. If he is extradited to the US, he will face trial on 18 charges, including 17 counts under the Espionage Act. These are related to the hundreds of thousands of classified documents and diplomatic cables published by WikiLeaks that exposed horrific abuses committed by the US military during the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. If Assange is convicted, he could face a combined prison sentence of 175 years. Early last year, a district court had blocked Assange's extradition, declaring it oppressive on account of his mental health and high risk of suicide. However, this decision was thrown out by the High Court in December, following the assurances of US prosecutors regarding the conditions of his imprisonment. In January, Assange was granted permission to appeal the decision in the Supreme Court. However, in March, the Supreme Court declined to hear the application. The following month, the extradition order was formally approved by Chief Magistrate Paul Goldspring of the Westminster Magistrates Court and subsequently forwarded to Secretary Patel for approval. A Home Office spokesperson said on Friday that in this case, the UK courts have not found that it would be oppressive, unjust, or an abuse of process to extradite Mr. Assange, nor have they found that extradition would be incompatible with his human rights, including his right to fair trial and to freedom of expression, and that whilst in the US, he will be treated appropriately, including in relation to his health. Assange's defense team has dismissed these supposed assurances, highlighting their conditional and reversible nature. They will now have the opportunity to challenge the extradition based on other points of law which have not been subject to the appeals process. These could potentially include grounds such as the right to freedom of expression and if the extradition was politically motivated. The US Treasury Department on Thursday sanctioned 2 companies based in Hong Kong, 3 in Iran and 4 in the UAE or United Arab Emirates, after accusing them of effectuating international transactions and evading sanctions, supporting the sale of Iranian petrochemical products to customers in the PRC and the rest of East Asia. The companies sanctioned have been accused of dealing with Trillian's Petrochemical Company Limited or Trillians and Iran's Petrochemical Commercial Company PCC. 2 individuals, 1 Chinese citizen and 1 Indian, have also been sanctioned. Brian E. Nelson, Undersecretary of the Treasury for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, claimed that though the US is trying to revive the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or JCPOA diplomatically, absent a deal, we will continue to use our sanction authorities to limit exports of petroleum, petroleum products, and petrochemical products from Iran. Iran has dismissed the fresh round of sanctions imposed by the Joe Biden administration, calling them ineffectual. Our petrochemical industry and its products have long been under sanctions. But our sales have continued through various channels and shall continue to do so, claimed Mehdi Safari, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Al-Mayadeen reported. The US unilaterally withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal or JCPOA in 2018 under the Donald Trump presidency. The Trump administration also imposed numerous sanctions on Iran under its so-called maximum pressure campaign to force it to renegotiate the deal with a much wider mandate, including Iran's regional and missile defense policies. Iran has refused to renegotiate the deal and undertaken measures to reduce its own commitments under it in response to the sanctions. President Biden, who during his election campaign promised to rejoin the deal, has refused to lift the Trump-era sanctions. His administration has instead imposed new sanctions despite initiating indirect talks with Iran to revive the deal under the mediation of the remaining signatories in Vienna since early 2021. Israeli occupation forces killed 3 Palestinian youth and injured 10 others during their raid at a refugee camp in Jenin on early morning of Friday, June 17. All 3 Palestinians were sitting inside a car, which was surrounded by the Israeli forces and fired at. The 4th person in the car is hospitalized. The Palestinian Authority claimed in a statement issued later that the 3 Palestinians, Yusuf Nasser Salah, 23, Bara Lalu, 24, and Laith Abu Surur, 24, were killed in cold blood by undercover Israeli army forces in a midnight raid. As per news reports, at least 30 Israeli military vehicles surrounded the camp at Jenin before they shot at the vehicle, claiming it was carrying weapons. Midnight raids by occupation Israeli forces in Jenin have increased following the uptick in armed resistance by Palestinians since the beginning of the year. The raids have led to the killing by Israeli forces of at least 60 Palestinians so far this year, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Meanwhile, an internal probe conducted by Israeli forces confirmed that its personnel were responsible for the misconduct at the funeral of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. However, as per a report in Haaretz newspaper, the Israeli police department have decided not to take any action on those responsible. Israeli forces had ordered a probe after international outrage over their attack on the mourners during the funeral procession of Abu Akleh in May. The security forces have refused to release the findings of the investigation report submitted earlier. Veteran Al Jazeera journalist Abu Akleh was killed by Israeli sniper near Jenin in the occupied West Bank on May 11, when she, along with other journalists, was going to cover an occupation raid on a refugee camp. She was given a state funeral by the Palestinian Authority, and thousands of Palestinians participated in her funeral procession. Israeli security forces had later attacked the pallbearers during Akleh's funeral procession in the occupied East Jerusalem, almost causing them to drop her coffin. Israeli forces also attacked other mourners, snatched Palestinian flags from their hands, and carried out baton charges. According to Palestinian Red Crescent, at least 33 Palestinians were injured in the attack. Italian migrant rights organizations are holding a series of mobilizations on June 17 and 18 ahead of World Refugee Day. The mobilizations in Naples and Caserta will demand peace, social justice, and the regularization of undocumented people. Organizations building the two-day mobilization have arranged assemblies and meetings in the fields where the migrants are exploited in the agricultural industry and in the extraordinary reception centers. These are collective shelters in which refugees are forced to live. World Refugee Day has special significance this year. The Ukrainian war has led to a major refugee influx. However, it has also highlighted the double standards with which refugees from Asia and Africa are treated. Many of them have been forced to flee their homelands due to military actions and sanctions imposed by EU and NATO members. In Italy, while migrants continue to be a vital driver of the economy, they face poverty, institutional racism, and precarious working conditions. Long wait times at immigration offices, the impossibility of renewing documents, often due to illegitimate requests by institutions, create the perfect conditions for blackmail and labor exploitation. In August 2020, the government's regularization program was introduced, supposedly to solve these problems. But according to the organizers of the protests, 2 years after its introduction, the program has ended up as an empty promise. They have pointed out that in summer 2020, over 200,000 requests were passed on to immigration officers. However, 2 years later, over 110,000 migrants still await their papers. And that's all for today. For more such stories, visit our website peoplesdispatch.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.